Grateful for your presence. Before I begin the lesson, I want to mention a couple of things, some disturbing things. Several years ago, I traveled to Nigeria and another country in Africa, but I'm receiving reports out of Nigeria of pretty serious persecution of Christians. There are Christians there that are being killed, especially in the southern part of Nigeria. There is some even more serious oppression in the north, but most of the Christians are in the southern part of Nigeria. The northern part's largely Muslim. And especially some of the letters I'm seeing are from the area around Ubima, which, well, if you look at the map, this is between Benin City and Calabar, and I've preached and visited in both of those cities. But Christians are their property's being taken, they're being beaten, they're being killed, and it is a very serious thing that we ought to be prayerful about. We live in a country that is tremendously blessed. There are a large number of faithful Christians in Nigeria. There's probably per capita as many Christians there as there are here in Indianapolis. And they are more. Some of those cities there are more. And they're undergoing persecution, and we should be prayerful about it. The preachers there have said to myself and others for several years now that it's too dangerous for Americans to go over there. I think it's dangerous for the Americans, and I think it's dangerous for the Nigerians that would have to accompany us over there as well. So it's very difficult to get direct firsthand information from Americans that can go over, but it is a serious situation that you should be aware of. It isn't covered in our newspaper, which primarily talks about cats and feel-good stories. It doesn't do a whole lot of international reporting. So I'd like for you to think about that. I thought this account that we read about Tabitha was interesting, but I also wanted to show you another account in Mark, the 5th chapter, verse 22, beginning. There's a simple story here, but it's amazing. Amazing things are there, and there's a number of very important principles, wonderful principles, that we can learn as we look at this synagogue ruler, Jairus, and the Son of God who helped him. And so if you could turn over there, I'd like to consider that with you today. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live." I need to mark that because I'm going to refer back to that several times. And I want to be able to find it quick. I've got to where I fumble so much turning pages. I want you to think with me, first of all, this is a simple lesson, about what sort of things this ruler of the synagogue had to lay aside in order to come see Jesus. First of all, he had to lay aside any of his prejudice. A lot of the people who heard Jesus were not his friends, and there was considerable growing opposition to him. You might turn with me over into John 12, and here we might notice verse 42. Among the chief rulers, many believed on him, but because of the Pharisees, they did not confess him, lest they should be put out of the synagogue, for they love the praise of men more than the praise of God. So this ruler, one of the first things he had to do was say, now, there's going to be some people who look at me funny, who are prejudiced by the fact that I have gone to see Jesus and appeal to him. And it would be better, sometimes there's just people that you don't talk to unless you get a bad feeling from. Hey, I tell you what, kids, I always tell you, some of you are taking notes, right, Isaac? Good. Some of you are a little too young to take notes. So you want to draw me a picture today? Well, I want you to draw me a picture of a sick girl that Jesus heals and raises up. Can you do that? Max was fussing at me. Somebody was fussing at me last week because the picture I think it was you, Maddie. The picture I gave you was too simple. So try this. This is a little harder. This is a sick girl that Jesus raises up from the dead. So it should be interesting to you. But anyway, the ruler had to lay aside all of his prejudice, all of that. And have you ever had to ask somebody for help? Can you imagine a religious leader laying at the feet of a doctor or surgeon, falling and groveling and begging for help? Ooh, that's hard. Begging for help. That's what this man was doing. His daughter was sick. And here this very important man was. He passed by the doctor's house. He passed by everybody's house. They weren't helping him. And he went to see Jesus. A man that some of the religious leaders didn't like. Denied that he had the power. Accused him occasionally of casting out demons, of doing these miracles by the power of the devil himself. So he had to get rid of that. And third, he had to lay aside his pride in having to admit, I can't help my daughter. Man, that's hard, isn't it? It's just hard. I can't help. I don't know what to do. I want to do something, but I don't know what to do. To have to admit that it's beyond my ability. There might be one or two of us, men, who've even had trouble when we were out driving around and got lost to ask for directions. And our wife is there, so will you stop over here? Here's the gas station. She's going to go in McDonald's and ask them where this place is. Oh, no, we'll drive around another half hour looking for it. Why? Because they're too proud to ask for help. Sometimes it's hard to lay aside that sense of pride. And so this religious synagogue ruler admitted he had a problem he couldn't fix, and he wanted to help his daughter, but he couldn't. You've been in that. When you took a child to the hospital, where's Ava? Ava, are you back there awake? There you are. Do you know how helpless your mama felt when you broke your leg? She couldn't fix your leg. It's a helpless feeling. You got to go to the doctor and say, please, my lovely little redheaded daughter needs her leg fixed. We need some help with this. Can you help me? And so they loved you an awful lot. They interrupted everything, said, we've got to get this solved. And fourth, he didn't have to care. He had to stop caring about how his friends looked at him. So much of what we do, and how we act, how we dress, how we talk, is based on what our friends think of us. How many of you have walked into church and the wind's blowing out there and your hair's all askew, and some wiseacre talks about, did you come to church with the windows down? What's going on? And, immediately I think, where's somebody here? Where is he? There he is back there. Steve last week did exactly that thing. His hair looked like he had been in a mix master. And so we commented on it. His wife said, I told you it was that way. And he immediately went in and came out after hosing down his head so he could get the hair under control. We've all done that. But we do it all the time. We dress the way our friends want us to. We behave. We go places the way, and we don't want to be odd to our friends. This man had to stop caring about that. He didn't care what his friends said. Didn't care what they did. And, as I've gotten older, I have a chair that suits me to a T. At the dinner table, do you kids know which one's my chair? Absolutely, they know. I've got it on a plaque up there. One of my sons, wiseacre sons, did all of my rules, my 10 commandments. And one of them, thou shalt not sit in grandpa's chair. It's on the wall. Immemorialized now. We like the comforts of our home. But this fella got up out of that. And he went to Jesus. He was willing to leave everything. Now think about this for yourself just a little bit. In order to obey the Lord, are you willing to lay aside for a little while your prejudices against religion? Are you willing to lay aside for a little while your sense of dignity? How smart you are and how wise you are? Are you willing to lay aside your pride? Are you willing to say, I'm not caring what my friends think right now. I'm going to do what's right. Willing to get out of your comfort zone. This man was. But as well, why did he do all this? Why do it? Well, he did it because he loved his daughter. Loved his daughter. She was 12 years old. She was his only daughter. And love for our children can make us do some crazy things. We stay awake all night worrying, checking on them. We have those long talks with them. We pay the expensive medical bills. We buy them braces, Jonathan. Costs a fortune, doesn't it? But you know that you've got to try to advertise Jonathan to some girl and make him attractive. And somebody with snaggle teeth is kind of hard to sell. So we buy those braces so they look good. We can pretend there was good breeding there. We can do all those late night projects where your kid, forgot the science fairs tomorrow and he's got to have a project. And so there you are, 2 a.m. You have to go to work and you're messing with glue and stuff. You do that because you love them. And have you, Leanne, did you ever have any early morning cold weather soccer games? Did you want to get up and go out when the temperature was blowing and raining and to watch a bunch of kids kick a ball around the field? No. But you did it. I happen to know you did it. Why? Because you love them. You love them. And you say to yourself over and over again, they're only young ones. And so I'll do all of this because I've only got them for a little while. We love our kids and we'll sacrifice for them. That's why he did this. He loved his daughter. But in addition, her pain hurt him. Kids don't realize that. But when you get hurt, woo, yeah, you're crying and all, but your mom or your dad hurts just as bad as you do, or worse. Just as bad. They hear you crying, they see the hurt. If they can do something about it, they're trying hard to do something about it. But a lot of times they can't. He wanted her to live. He knew that if she died, the next day at breakfast, her chair would be empty. And that would hurt something awful. It does hurt something. And he loved her, and it hurt him, and he wanted to do something about it. Her need mattered more than his pride. Who cared what the world thought? Who cares how it's going to make him look? How many of you big, strong men? You know, I read this, it's been on the internet several times. Which one of you is so tough that when a little child offers you their hand, you don't take it? You that tough? I think so. Buddy I know takes that hand and walks with that child. It's just something we do. Here's a little girl who needed help, and that's absolutely all that mattered. Look with me over in Luke here. I want you to notice the 10th chapter. And we'll read verse 29. It says here, this ruler that came to him asked, "Who is my neighbor?" Jesus answering said, "A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. By chance there came down a certain priest that way. When he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, he saw him and passed by on the other side. Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was. When he saw him, he had compassion, and went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring in and set him on his own beast, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow, when he departed, he took out 2 pence, and gave them to the host, and said unto him, Take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I'll repay thee. Which now of these 3 thinkest thou was neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? Here was a man between the Jews and the Samaritan. There's a world of history and a world of differences. All the Samaritan saw was a man in need, somebody who needed help. Do you suppose that could be you and me? Her needs mattered more than his pride. And finally, he believed Jesus could help. It helped other people. It helped others. Maybe he could get to him and see if he could help his daughter. He'd come while she was still alive. She was just terribly sick. If he couldn't help, nobody could. He believed only Jesus could help. So he went to the source. Well, read with me the rest of Mark 5. While he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house some who said, Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, do not fear, only believe. Boy, wouldn't you have hated to have had to be that servant? Have you had to tell anybody that? Your daughter's dead? Oh, most of us would do nearly anything not to have to be the one to say that. So that servant pulled him aside and said, don't bother. Your daughter who was sick is dead. There's no more hope. Jesus overheard it, said to the ruler of the synagogue, do not fear, only believe. He allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. When he had entered, he said to them, why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping. They laughed at him. But he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, Talitha cumi, which means, little girl, I say to thee, arise. Immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age, and they were immediately overcome with amazement. Why do we love Jesus? Well, first of all, he gives hope where people see despair. They see only despair. What do you think this ruler thought when he got this message? Here in John 5. You might remind yourself of verse 35. I'm going to find my place here in a minute. I thought I was in the right place. He was in absolute despair. Yeah, that's right. You're right. I'm staring at it and I can't see it. Here, I can see it now. I'm getting there, although I'm steadily going blind. He says, while he yet spake, there came from the ruler of the synagogue's house certain which said, thy daughter is dead. Why troublest thou the master any further? The Lord gave these people hope. You remember what he said to them? He said, be not afraid, only believe. And they started hurrying to the house. He has a faith. He had a faith. You know, a lot of times we only see fear and death and sickness. This man feared the worst. It looked terrible to him. Look with me in Timothy, 2 Timothy. Chapter 1, and here I want you to see verse 7. For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Fear had taken over this man, and Jesus needed to allay that. The Lord had faith while everybody else was terrified around him. When he gets there, we see chaos, commotion, weeping, wailing. They actually hired professional wailers. And despite all of that uproar, Jesus asked them to go out. The world is throwing their hands up in the air and grieving and wailing and mourning. It's Christ who reaches out and says to us, I'll give you rest. I'll give you rest. And we love him for that. We see their mockery. Look at verse 40. He says, they laughed him to scorn. They laughed him to scorn. They mocked him. But when he had put them all out, he taketh the father and the mother of the damsel, and them that were with him, the 3 men, and entereth in where the damsel was lying. We see the fact that they were resigned to the death. His action in love and in power. In verse 41, he took the damsel by the hand and said unto her, Talitha cumi, which is being interpreted, damsel, I say, get up. He acts while others are resigned. He acts. And that's why we love him. With Jesus, we're called to a life of hope and calm and care. And I want to tell you one other thing before we close. You know, in the Bible, in the New Testament, there are 2 or 3 little hints of Jesus' childhood. There are 2 or 3 of them at the cross. But this is one of them. This account here in Mark 5. Did you realize what every Jewish mother said to her daughter and son in the morning when they wanted to get them out of bed? They said, little lamb, get up. That's Talitha cumi. Jesus said the same words that child would have heard from his mother every day of her life. Little lamb, get up. Now you, today, are the little lamb. Paul, in Hebrews 12, says that laying aside the weight and the sin that so easily besets us, let us run with patience the race set before us. So, little lambs, will you get up? Will you come to Jesus? Not caring what anybody else thinks, casting away all your pride, realizing that this is the only source of help and hope. Come while we stand and sing.